In a quiet town just beyond the city limits, the police precinct sat on a tree-lined street where neighbors nodded hello as they passed. The building wore a coat of light gray paint, and a flag fluttered above its entrance. Inside, the floors were always polished, and the air smelled faintly of cleaning supplies. Officer Jake Reynolds walked those halls each day with a comfortable ease. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a voice that carried when he spoke. To most people, he seemed confident and direct. But to some, his words cut deeper than they needed to. Jake liked to finish calls quickly, check the boxes on his reports, and move on. He believed he knew the best way to do his job and often grew impatient with anyone who slowed him down. Jake had been on the force for 8 years. He had learned the routines, the shortcuts, and the quiet paths through the files that let him close cases faster than his partners. When he drove the patrol car, he followed routes he knew by heart, greeted colleagues by name and joked with them at the coffee machine. But beneath the easy chatter, there was a side of Jake that showed when he dealt with some of the town's residents. When he saw people from certain neighborhoods, his tone turned sharper, his questions shorter. He seemed to assume guilt before he asked for proof. Minor traffic stops became tense moments. A dropped license could earn a stern lecture. People who looked different from him often felt his disapproval before they heard his words. Across town, Captain Mariah Davis took a different approach. She arrived at work each morning with a quiet confidence. She drove an unmarked car and preferred to walk the halls rather than ride the elevator. Many remembered the day she first walked into this precinct 20 years ago as a young cadet. Back then, she kept her head down, worked late into the night, and studied every rule. She earned promotions one by one. Along the way, she faced challenges that tested her will. Some officers doubted her ability. Others whispered behind closed doors that a black woman could not lead a group of mostly white men and women in uniform. But Mariah believed in fairness, in clear rules, and in listening more than talking. She grew stronger with each test she passed. When the day dawned crisp and bright, Mariah slipped on her badge and pinned it on her uniform with care. She walked into the briefing room where she greeted each member of her team. Her voice was calm and steady. She shared updates on cases, offered praise for good work, and reminded everyone of the need to serve with respect. Under her watch, the precinct saw lower complaint numbers and higher approval ratings in the community surveys. Parents felt safer walking their children to school, and business owners reported a steady drop in shoplifting incidents. Still, change does not erase old grudges. Jake Reynolds and a few other officers felt their routines shifting. They whispered that meetings took longer, that decisions needed extra signatures, and that their judgment was questioned more often. Some believed the new policies slowed them down. Others simply resented that someone they thought of as an outsider now held the reins in the neighborhood near the precinct. Community groups gathered to talk about safety. A small group of neighbors met in a church basement every month. They invited Mariah to listen to their stories. They spoke of streetlights that did not work, of speeding cars, and of youth who felt unseen. Mariah wrote down every suggestion, thanked them for their time, and promised follow-up. Her genuine concern inspired trust. Jake, on the other hand, saw the group's efforts as a chance to prove officers right. He believed people asked for help and then blamed the police when they did not get results fast enough. He stayed at the precinct most nights, reviewing case files alone. He was convinced that his own hard work would speak for itself. Yet under the surface of routine, a storm began to build. Some veteran officers traded stories of the old days when decisions were simple and orders clear. They wondered if new rules forced by the captain came from someone who did not understand the job's real demands. In the locker room, they joked about leadership classes that seemed never to end. The more they complained, the more tension they felt. For Mariah, the task was simple: keep the focus on fairness and safety. For Jake, it felt like a daily reminder that someone else's rules might challenge the way he saw the world. And as both patrol cars and foot patrols carried officers through quiet streets and busy corners, the lines between respect and resentment grew sharper, waiting for an unexpected moment to bring everything to light. She stepped out of her unmarked car, wearing plain clothes, a simple blouse and slacks, her badge hidden in an inside pocket. Captain Davis wanted to see for herself how the team handled everyday calls without the weight of her uniform. She walked toward the house at the end of Maple Street, where neighbors had reported a noise complaint. The sun was low in the sky, painting long shadows on the sidewalk. Children played in yards, and a few elderly folks sat on porches enjoying the evening air. Mariah moved calmly, her eyes open, taking in every detail of the street. Meanwhile, Jake Reynolds rounded the same corner in his patrol car. He had finished a long day of reports and was itching to head home early. When his radio crackled with the noise complaint, he felt annoyed. He believed such calls were minor distractions from real police work. He parked his car halfway on the curb, shut off the engine, and grabbed his flashlight. He strode over to the corner house, scanning the yard as he walked. His jaw was set and his eyes narrowed. He saw a dark shape by the front door and assumed someone was trying to sneak away. As Jake approached, Mariah reached for the doorknob. She paused when she noticed the patrol car. A shadow moved across the window. She straightened, preparing to introduce herself properly if it was one of her officers. But when she pulled on the knob, it felt locked. She knocked gently and said, "Hello, this is the police. Is everything all right?" There was no answer. Jake hurried forward, shining his light on her face. In that sudden beam, he did not recognize her calm, mature eyes. He saw only another stranger. "Hey, step back," he barked. "Show me your hands." His voice was loud and firm. Mariah frowned. She raised her free hand slowly, her other hand still on the door. "I'm with the department," she said softly. "I'm just here to check on Jake." Cut her off, suspicion heavy. In his words, "Department who?" he demanded. The knife edge of his tone surprised her. She unclipped her badge case and opened it to show him, but her hand was partly hidden behind the doorframe. Jake saw the flash of metal but could not read the badge at that angle. Tension tightened the air. Mariah sensed his doubt, but she did not raise her voice. She said, "Captain Mariah Davis, I'm here with you. We're on the same side." Jake's face hardened. In his mind, she did not look like any captain he knew. He thought captains stayed inside precincts, not sneaking around plainclothes. He looked her up and down, his posture rigid. "Plain clothes, huh?" he said, tone flat. "Show your ID, or I'll cuff you for impersonation." He stepped closer. Flashlight waving across her chest, Mariah's heart beat faster. She realized he refused to see the badge. She moved to step out from behind the door, to give him a better view. "Look at the badge," she said. "I'm Captain Davis. You'll find my name on the roster inside the station." She spoke clearly, steady in her breathing. Jake caught sight of her ID again. He saw the photo, the name, and the word captain. But old habits die hard. He folded his arms and said, "I need a verbal ID first. State your name and business." Mariah paused. She felt the foolishness of the moment. An experienced officer should have recognized her in seconds. But she also knew this was exactly why she had come plainclothes, to see if her own officers would respect the rules rather than the uniform. "My name is Captain Mariah Davis," she repeated. "Here to investigate a noise complaint. May I enter?" She lifted her chin, waiting. Jake's face was stony, tilted his head and glanced at the house, then back at her. Without warning, his patience snapped, at a long day behind him. He felt challenged by this unknown woman telling him what to do, so he lashed out. His fist swung in a wide arc. Mariah had no time to flinch. The punch caught her off guard, landing on her cheek. Pain flooded her senses. She stumbled backward, hand instinctively going to her face. He watched her eyes widen in shock. Then he saw something he never expected, her badge's seal catching. In the street light, for a moment, time slowed. Mariah steadied herself against the doorframe. Her blouse was soft cotton, not armor, yet her spirit stayed firm. "Why did you do that?" she asked, voice low but strong. Jake's jaw clenched. He felt his hand trembling. He had struck someone in plain sight, someone who might be just a citizen or a dangerous criminal. Suddenly, questions he had refused to ask ran through his mind. You said you're a captain," he stuttered. "Are you the captain?" The words felt clumsy. Mariah straightened her shoulders. She could taste blood in her mouth, where her lip had split. She brushed her hair back, showing him the badge clearly. "Yes," she said quietly. "I am Captain Mariah Davis. You just punched your chief." The truth landed between them like a heavy weight. Jake's eyes widened. He stared at her uniform. Backup arriving in marked cars, lights flashing. He heard his name over the radio. Officer Reynolds, respond to Maple Street. His own voice on the dispatch cut him deep. Heat rose to his face as realization sank in. He dropped his flashlight. It hit the pavement with a loud clatter. His legs felt unsteady. He stared at Mariah, at the officers stepping from their cars, uniforms pristine and respectful. He saw respect in their eyes that he had taken for granted. Shame washed over him. He dropped to his knees, hands covering his mouth, as if to hold back words he might regret. "Chief, I'm sorry," he gasped. His voice cracked. His knees scraped on the concrete. Mariah took a cautious step toward him. She did not want him to think she would punish him on the spot. She had built her reputation on fairness. "Stand up," she said gently. "We will sort this out." Jake stayed kneeling, tears welling. He remembered the stories he had heard about her fairness, her calm leadership, but in that moment, he felt only remorse. He took a deep breath and forced himself up, head bowed. His uniform looked different now, like armor he no longer trusted. But around them, the night air held a hush. Neighbors who had paused their activities watched from driveways. Some held phones, recording, others just stared, mouth open. Mariah glanced at them, then back to Jake. "Officer Reynolds," she said, voice cold but steady. "You assaulted me. You have violated our code." She waited while his shoulders shook. She thought of all the meetings she had led, all the training sessions she had enforced, and realized this moment would test every policy she had written. Still, she knew her duty was clear. "You will come with me," she said. "We will handle this properly." Jake nodded, tears falling. He offered no excuses. He knew there was no excuse. The neighbors watched as he turned without resistance and followed her to the patrol car. Mariah put a hand on his elbow, not in pity, but in firm guidance. She wanted him to see that respect was not a weakness, but a strength. In that moment, under the streetlight's glow, two officers walked together, one broken by his own bias, the other carrying the weight of leadership with quiet dignity. And no one could predict what would come next, only that the ground had shifted forever, 3/3. Mariah led Jake into the station without a word. The bright lights felt harsh after the street lamp's glow. Officers in the bullpen turned to watch, their eyes full of questions. Jake's uniform looked stiff on him now, like a costume he longer recognized, kept his gaze low, avoiding every pair of eyes that met his. Mariah closed the door behind them and walked down the hallway toward the Internal Affairs office. Each step echoed on the tile floor. Jake followed his boots, making nervous thuds. He could feel the weight of his mistake pressing down on his shoulders. Inside the IA office, a plain wooden table sat under a clock whose hands ticked too loudly. A woman in plain clothes introduced herself as Investigator Lopez. She offered both of them seats. Mariah sat with perfect posture, her face calm but serious. Jake sat on the other side, slumped forward, his hands clasped tightly together. Lopez spoke in a quiet voice. "Captain Davis, Officer Reynolds, we need your statements." Mariah nodded once. Jake winced at the sound of his own name. Every word felt heavy. Lopez turned to Jake first. "Officer Reynolds, please tell me what happened." He took a breath and closed his eyes for a moment. Then he looked up, voice shaking. He described the call, the knock at the door, and how he failed to see the badge. He admitted he treated the woman with suspicion and let his bias guide his actions. His words came slowly, but he spoke openly. He confessed that he saw a stranger and acted on instinct rather than fact. He said he felt ashamed the moment he realized who he hit. When his voice broke on that admission, Mariah watched him with steady eyes. She resisted the urge to look angry. Instead, she thought of every officer she had mentored, every policy she had written, to prevent this very moment. She counted to 5 in her head before answering Lopez's questions about her approach. She explained why she wore plain clothes, how she hoped to test the officer's respect for procedure, and how she chose to remain calm even when she felt pain. She spoke slowly, ensuring every detail was clear. Jake listened, regret pooling in his chest. After both statements, Lopez excused them. Mariah stood and said quietly, "Jake, wait for me in the captain's office." Jake nodded, relief and dread mingling. He felt exposed, like every eye in the station was on him. As he left IA, he passed officers whispering by desks. Some shook their heads. Others looked away, uncomfortable. He wondered if they saw him now as less than before. He used to feel pride wearing this badge. Now he felt only shame. In her office, Mariah offered him 2 chairs. He sat where the light was dim. She closed the door behind her and moved to the window, looking out at the empty parking lot. Jake kept his head bowed. After a moment, she spoke. "Officer Reynolds, I won't lie. You broke the trust I place in every officer." Her voice was soft but firm. "But I also believe people can learn from their mistakes." He swallowed and nodded. He did not dare meet her eyes. His throat felt dry. He said nothing, waiting. She turned and studied him. "Tomorrow, you will join the bias training session I hold for the entire department." He flinched, but did not speak. "I will be there too," she added. "We will learn together." In that moment, he realized this was not just punishment, but an opportunity. He heard in her tone a challenge. "Prove that you can change." She let that hang in the air before returning to her desk. She handed him a small envelope. "Read this before you leave." She did not add anything else. He watched as she left the office, closing the door gently behind her. Jake opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter from Mariah, typed and signed. It spoke of forgiveness, a professional duty, and of the department's hope in him. It ended with a line, "Your next steps will show what kind of officer you truly want to be." Pressed it to his chest for a moment, then slipped it into his pocket. Felt tears stinging his eyes. In that simple gesture, he understood she saw more in him than his worst moment. Down the hallway, lights buzzed and phones rang. Outside the station, a local news camera filmed the front doors. Reporters had caught wind of the event. Rumors spread quickly about a captain struck by one of her own officers. Some in the community expected a cover-up. Others demanded transparency. Mariah knew the press would paint pictures that did not match her calm leadership. She would need to speak soon, to tell the truth without anger or blame. Meanwhile, Jake wandered to the locker room. He opened his locker and found his uniform looking foreign. He touched the badge over his heart, feeling its cold weight. He remembered the first time he pinned it on how proud he felt. Now pride seemed distant. He changed into plain clothes, his hands still trembling. A few officers gave him silent nods in passing. Others glanced away. He felt small and exposed. He tried to steady his breathing, unwilling to let anyone see how deeply he suffered. After changing, he found a quiet corner in the gym. He punched a bag softly, not with force, but with sorrow. Each strike echoed his regret. He thought of the pain he'd caused not only to Mariah, but also to the community he swore to protect. He realized that every stop he made before, every person he had treated with suspicion, might have felt the same fear. He imagined the families who wondered if they could trust him. Guilt burned in his chest. Later, when the station emptied, he returned to the locker room, sat on a bench and closed his eyes. He recalled Mariah's words about learning together. He resolved to attend every training session, to read every policy, and to speak honestly about his own bias. Not hide, he would ask questions. He knew the path ahead would be hard, but he felt, for the first time in a long while, a spark of purpose. In the captain's office, Mariah stayed late, preparing her speech for tomorrow's briefing. She rehearsed words about fairness, respect, and accountability. She wanted to address the entire force and the community watching outside, she thought. Of the lessons she hoped to teach, not in anger, but in clarity. She believed true leadership came from guiding even those who failed. She glanced at a photo on her desk, a younger Mariah standing in graduation robes. She remembered her first day as a cadet. Full of hope, she smiled softly. Tomorrow, she would remind everyone why they wore this badge: to serve without bias, to protect with integrity, and to learn, always, from every moment. By the time the clock chimed midnight, both captain and officer lay awake, each wrestling with the same truth that a single act could change everything, but that a chance to make amends could change more. And in that shared silence, the station held its breath, waiting to see what would come with the dawn. You said, Part 4KO expand. Crow without heading 1,300 words, Mayan simple. Mariah woke early the next morning, the sky still soft with dawn. She pulled on her uniform, straightened her badge, and took a deep breath. Today would test everything she believed about leadership and fairness. She wanted her words to reach every officer, and through them, the whole town. As she walked down the precinct's hall, she saw Jake waiting by the training room door. Mariah nodded back, then entered the room to set up. By the time other officers arrived, the room felt full. A projector stood ready, and a podium faced the seats. Outside, a few journalists gathered, hoping for details. Mariah had asked them to wait until after the session. She wanted to control the message, truth without anger. She glanced at Jake, now seated near the front, and felt both concern and hope in her chest. She stepped to the podium and cleared her throat. In her calm, steady voice, she welcomed everyone. She spoke of respect, of the duties they shared, and of the trust the public placed in them. She did not mention the punch by name. Instead, she said that every officer, no matter the rank, must follow the rules and treat every person with dignity. Jake watched, listening to each phrase as if it were a lifeline. He felt shame for his actions, but also relief that Mariah spoke of change, not just punishment. When the session moved into role-play exercises, she invited volunteers to practice difficult stops. Officers paired up. One pretended to be a citizen who did not speak English well, another to be a driver without papers, and so on. Mariah and a training officer coached them on calm questions and clear explanations. Jake's turn came when he was asked to play the officer, stopping a suspicious person. He remembered the knock on Maple Street, but this time he chose patience. He spoke slowly, asked open questions, and waited for answers. When his partner handed him a mock badge, he thanked her and backed away to let her explain freely. Felt quiet, but full of focus. After the exercises, Mariah invited questions. A few officers raised concerns. One asked how to handle a dangerous situation when time was short. Mariah said that safety came first, but there was always a moment to speak, breathe, and verify. Another asked what happened if someone lied about their identity. She explained. The steps: detain if needed, call for backup, but still keep respect. Each answer was guided by fairness and firmness. When the training ended, Mariah closed her laptop and looked around. I know today may be hard for some, she said. Mistakes happen. But every day we can choose to do better. She paused. Then she looked at Jake. Officer Reynolds has shown courage by facing what he did. He still has trust to earn, but I believe he will. The room stood silent for a moment, then applause broke out. Some clapped softly, others more loudly. Jake felt his chest tighten. He stood and bowed slightly, meeting Mariah's eyes. She gave him a small, encouraging nod. Later that afternoon, Mariah held a press conference in the station's lobby. Photographers filled the room, and reporters leaned forward with microphones. She stepped to the podium. She spoke honestly about the incident, that an officer struck his chief in plainclothes out of mistaken bias. She said the department would be fully transparent, that internal affairs had acted swiftly, and that new training would begin immediately. She outlined the bias session she had led and announced regular reviews of every officer's conduct. She spoke without anger, letting her calm strength show. Reporters scribbled notes. One asked if Officer Reynolds would face charges. She said the matter was under review, but that she hoped every officer would learn from it. Outside, community leaders watched live streams. A local minister posted on social media that she appreciated the chief's honesty. A neighborhood watch member praised the swift action. Some skeptics questioned whether real change would come. Mariah knew change was measured in actions, not words. She closed the conference and stepped down, shaking hands with reporters and community members. Jake watched from behind the crowds, his uniform pin badge in his pocket. He wondered how many of those reporters knew his name. He felt both fear and resolve. He had apologized, attended training, and now saw his chief stand for truth. He knew he had a long way to go. The room was warm with lamplight and filled with folding chairs. Families, business owners, and elders sat waiting. Jake sat a few seats down, in plain clothes. When the forum began, a resident thanked Mariah for her transparency. Mariah listened with her hands folded. When it was Jake's turn, he stood, cleared his throat, and said, "I'm the officer who made the mistake. I let bias guide me instead of policy. I'm sorry for the harm I caused." He paused, voice trembling. "I've started training. I will keep learning and earning your trust." The room fell silent, then a few gentle claps rose. A woman in the back nodded at him and smiled kindly. Mariah stood and thanked everyone. She spoke of teamwork between police and community, invited suggestions, and promised follow-up meetings. She then walked off the podium, making space for officers to mingle. Jake approached a small group of neighbors and spoke quietly. He answered questions honestly, told them he was committed to change. Some looked doubtful, some hopeful. He listened more than spoke, following the very lessons he had practiced. Back at the precinct late that night, Mariah reviewed reports of the day. She saw a memo from Internal Affairs recommending charges against Jake for assault. She sighed, knowing the process must run its course. She also saw the community forum's minutes, full of respectful dialogue. She felt both pride and the burden of leadership. She closed her laptop and stood. She walked to the patrol garage where Jake sat in his car, engine off, staring at the city lights. She tapped on his window. He rolled it down. "You did well today," she said. "Not perfect, but well." He looked at her, relief shining in his eyes. "Thank you, Chief," he whispered. She offered a small smile. "Keep going," she said. "That's all I ask." She walked away down the row of cars, leaving him to sit with his thoughts. In the days that followed, Jake attended every bias and de-escalation class. He read policy manuals at home and wrote reflections on each lesson. He volunteered for community patrols and helped at a youth sports clinic on weekends. He even joined Mariah at neighborhood meetings, taking notes and offering support. Slowly, officers began to see him differently. He greeted residents with respect, took time to explain procedures, and deferred to Mariah's guidance. Mariah, too, did not rest. She revised training schedules, set up regular bias audits, and hired a community liaison officer. She wrote memos reminding supervisors to model respect. She published quarterly reports on stops, searches, and complaints. She met with journalists to share data and to show that trust could be rebuilt. Complaints dropped. Community events hosted by the department drew larger crowds. Jake's name appeared in a local newspaper article highlighting his journey from error to educator. He now led a small workshop for new recruits on recognizing bias. Mariah read the article and felt a swell of gratitude. She knew the work was never done, but she also knew that one incident, handled with honesty and courage, could inspire real change. She stood by her window, looking at the lights of the town she served. In the quiet hum of the night, she thought of every partner, every neighbor, every officer who chose to learn and to grow. She knew that together they had moved closer to the promise of fairness and trust. Mariah stood at her desk early the next morning, the golden light of sunrise filtering through the blinds. She unfolded a cup of coffee, its steam curling upward, and she read the latest community survey results again. And officers now rated her training sessions as both fair and helpful. She felt a quiet satisfaction, but also knew this work never stopped. Every day brought new calls, new faces, and the chance to reinforce what she and Jake had learned together. Outside, the precinct buzzed with routine. Patrol cars rolled out, Officers walked the beat, and the front desk welcomed residents dropping off reports or asking questions. Jake arrived in uniform, the badge on his chest gleaming in the morning sun. He paused at the door, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. He saw Mariah in the briefing room, talking with a junior officer about community outreach programs. When she saw him, she gave a small wave. He waved back and walked over. "Morning, Chief," he said softly. His voice was steady now, without the tremor it had first held after that awful night. Mariah smiled. "Morning, Jake. Ready for today's meeting with the youth mentors?" Jake nodded. He had joined a volunteer group at the community center helping teens learn conflict resolution. He found it rewarding to share what he once resisted learning. "Yes," he said. "I've brought some handouts to share." They walked together through the bullpen, and officers glanced up, nodding at both of them. Something in the air had shifted. Where once there had been awkward looks or hushed whispers when Jake passed, now there were nods of respect. They reached the small conference room, where a dozen mentors waited. A sign read, "Teen Leadership Workshop." Mariah opened the door and held it for Jake, and he stepped inside behind her. The room was bright, with posters of positive messages. On the walls, teenagers sat in a semicircle, some fidgeting, others watching quietly. Mariah greeted them warmly, then introduced Jake. He cleared his throat briefly, remembering the fear he once dealt to strangers. But now he spoke with confidence and humility. He told the teens about the importance of listening first, of asking questions, and of looking past assumptions. He showed them simple exercises in empathy, role-playing someone who might seem different. At first glance, the teens laughed as they acted out silly scenarios, but they also learned how easy it was to misjudge someone. After the workshop, a girl with bright purple hair lingered. She asked Jake if he had ever been afraid of someone who looked different from him. Jake thought of his own fear and shame. He knelt down to meet her eye level and said, "I did once. I let fear guide me instead of fairness. It led me to hurt someone I respected. But I learned that by asking questions and listening, we can see the person inside." The girl nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "I'll remember that," she said. Jake smiled, real and kind. Meanwhile, Mariah spoke with a mentor about expanding these workshops. She wanted to reach more neighborhoods and involve parents. The mentor agreed excitedly. Mariah felt hope seeing community and police working side by side. She knew that nothing changed overnight, but each small step built a stronger foundation. That afternoon, Mariah called Jake into her office. He wondered if there was more disciplinary action ahead. But when he entered, she gestured him to sit. On her desk lay a folder and a certificate. He opened the folder first. Inside was a commendation letter from the police chief's office, praising Mariah's leadership and Jake's commitment to change. Then he saw the certificate, Community Builder Award, signed by the mayor. He looked at Mariah, surprise and gratitude shining in his eyes. "I believe you earned this," she said gently. "Not because you struck me, but because you chose to learn, to grow, and to teach others. You turned a mistake into progress." Jake let the words wash over him. He felt tears welling up again. But these were not tears of shame. They were tears of relief and pride. He stood and shook her hand, firm and respectful. "Thank you, Chief. I will keep working." She nodded, and for a moment, they shared a quiet understanding. In the days that followed, the precinct hosted a community fair. Booths lined the parking lot. Face painting, career information, neighborhood watch, sign-up, and a stage for speeches. Mariah spoke first, thanking everyone for their support. Then Jake stepped up. He spoke not as an officer lecturing, but as a neighbor learning alongside them. He thanked the community for holding the precinct accountable and for welcoming him into conversation. He invited people to share their stories and asked for feedback on how the police could better serve them. Neighbors lined up at his booth. Afterward to talk, some shared concerns about traffic stops, others about youth safety, and some simply offered thanks. Jake listened to each person, jotting down notes. He felt a connection he had never felt before in uniform. He realized the badge could open doors, but only if used with respect and openness. Late one evening, as Mariah was locking up the station, Jake found her in the parking lot. He had waited for her. "Chief," he said, "I wanted to thank you." Again for your faith in me. Mariah straightened her coat. You did the work, Jake. I just guided you. He smiled. But without your example, I wouldn't have known how. She looked at him for a moment, then turned to walk toward her car. He followed and held the door open for her. She got in and closed the door with a soft click. In the weeks that came, the precinct continued its reforms. New officers received bias training before their first day. Veteran officers attended refresher courses regularly. Community Advisory Board met monthly with Mariah and her team. They reviewed policies, heard concerns, and suggested improvements. The department's complaint numbers dropped, and satisfaction surveys rose. Media reports praised the precinct as a model for other towns. Jake's journey became a story within the department. He mentored new officers, sharing his own experience. As a cautionary tale and an example of growth, he spoke at academy classes about bias and accountability. His words carried weight because he had lived the consequences. Never forgot the night he struck his chief. Every time he saw her badge. On her desk, he recalled the pain he caused and the forgiveness she offered. Mariah kept leading with integrity. She balanced community needs with officer safety, always reminding everyone that fairness and respect were non-negotiable. She celebrated successes, learned from mistakes, and remained approachable. Officers knew they could bring concerns to her without fear. Community members knew they could speak up and be heard. 1 year after the incident, a small ceremony marked the precinct's anniversary of renewed trust. Mariah and Jake stood together as guests from the mayor's office. Community leaders and officers gathered. The mayor praised the department's transformation, then turned to Jake. He handed him a small plaque for service beyond the call, for building bridges where walls once stood. Jake accepted it, voice steady, eyes bright, looked at it. Mariah and she gave him a proud nod. That night, after the ceremony, Mariah returned to her empty office. She sat at her desk and placed a framed photo of that dawn years ago when she was a new cadet. Next to it, she placed a photo of Jake receiving his plaque. She thought of the journey between those moments, a journey marked by a wrong turn, accountability, learning, and perseverance. She felt a deep calm knowing the precinct was stronger because of it. Down the hall, Jake changed out of his dress uniform and into plain clothes. He paused before his locker, touching the Community Builder Award on its hook. He smiled softly, remembering the girl at the workshop and the neighbors he met at the fair. I thought of every moment he listened instead of acted on fear. Then he closed the locker and walked out into the night, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. In that quiet town beyond the city limits, the precinct stood not just as a building of gray walls, but as a symbol of change. 2 officers, a chief and a former skeptic, turned advocates, showed that respect and honesty could heal wounds. And while the road of trust never truly ends, they walked it together, each step a promise of a better tomorrow.